Hello everybody, my name is Caden Van Heis and this is my English Communications 103 informative speech. Today I'm going to be talking about the franchise of the Chicago Cubs. We're going to go back to 1908 to start this one out. This was the season of the World Series between the Chicago Cubs and the Detroit Tigers. The Chicago Cubs would win this one, beating the Tigers by quite a bit. This brought a lot of joy and excitement to Chicago Cubs fans all over the nation. Little did they know, though, this excitement and joy would not be felt for another long 108 seasons. The Cubs set the longest World Series drought in MLB history, lasting 108 years. Until that 108th season, there was a lot of sadness throughout the Cubs franchise, but that 108th season would bring a powerhouse team to the north side, where the Cubs would win the 2016 World Series. We'll get to that later, though. From 1908 to 2016, the Chicago Cubs set historic records, both good and bad. Today, I'm going to be talking through three main points of the Chicago Cubs baseball program. We're going to start with their history, then we're going to go into the drought, the 108-year drought, and then we're going to finish it off with the 2016 World Series, which was a very big moment for the Cubs. So we're going to go back to 1976, which was when the Chicago Cubs program initiated. Originally, they were called the Chicago White Stockings, and they weren't called the Cubs until 1907. So 1906 is when it all started. The Cubs were a pretty good baseball team until then, but 1906 they won their first World Series ever. And after that, they would win the 1907 and 1908 World Series, winning 3 World Series in a row. This is when the Cubs became a very big powerhouse throughout the MLB. Those teams were led by players such as Ross Barnes, Deacon White, and Cap Anson, 3 very good baseball players. After that 1908 season, it would slowly be led to a major drought for the Chicago Cubs. They would still win a couple of pennants, but it wasn't until 1945 that the real drought started. They didn't win another pennant until the 2000s. So like I said, the drought came after 1945. One big event throughout this drought for the Chicago Cubs was the curse of the Billy Goat. So this was a name given to the Chicago Cubs in the 1945 World Series in Game 4. This happened because a man took his billy goat actually to the Chicago Cubs World Series baseball game, and he took it into the stadium. Not sure how he got to do that. They told him to leave actually, and he was really frustrated. And so as he left, he shouted and he was like, "The Cubs are not going to win a World Series or win a pennant ever again." And so people called that the curse of the Billy Goat, because it was true. The Cubs did not win a pennant for over 71 years, which was after that Billy Goat died. Another big event throughout this time was the year of 2003 with Steve Bartman. This was a World Series where a fan, and you can look this up, it's a very famous moment in MLB history. A fan named Steve Bartman caught a foul ball that would have been in play and would have gotten the Cubs an out in the 2003 World Series and would have sealed the deal for them to win the 2003 World Series. But instead, since the fan caught it, it was a foul ball, gave the hitter another opportunity to get a hit, and he actually did get a hit, and they scored 3 more runs and won that World Series, which was a pretty crazy thing. As Kessinger explains in the Miracle Collapse, a book that I read, the Cubs had the longest pennant drought of any non-expansion National League team, going on 23 years, and Ernie Banks had been there for all 16 of them. And this shows the incredible disaster that this drought was, given the stud players that the Chicago Cubs had on their team, one of them being Ernie Banks. Now we get to the 2016 season of the Chicago Cubs. According to Al Yellen, under the leadership of President of Baseball Operations, Theo Epstein, the Cubs began a rebuilding process that involved strategic player acquisitions and a focus on developing young talent. Some of that young talent was very evident in the 2016 World Series Game 7 starting lineup. This included players such as Dexter Fowler, Kyle Schwarber, Javier Baez, Addison Russell, Wilson Contreras, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and others. They achieved a very hard-to-accomplish feat of winning over 100 games in the regular season, and that season being 103 games that they won, to be exact. The World Series came down to the Cleveland Indians versus the Chicago Cubs. This was a crazy World Series that nobody will ever forget. The Cubs were down 3-1 to start against the Indians, and they would come back to beat the Cleveland Indians in Game 7 after having an 11% chance to win that World Series. As you can see here, the Cubs have much rich history throughout the MLB, and they're a very interesting program, one of America's teams, and I hope that you learned a lot about the Chicago Cubs, their drought, and their powerhouse seasons in 1908 and 2016. Thanks for listening.